Hi friends, I want you to close your eyes for a second, just for a second. I want you to think about a version of you. Maybe 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, maybe just last year. A version of you that was so full of hope, so full of fire. A version of you that looked at the world and said, I'm going to do something with my life. I'm going to be something. I'm going to matter. And then I want you to think about what happened next. Life happened. People happened. Disappointment happened. And slowly, quietly, without even realizing it, you started shrinking. You started dimming your own light. You started apologizing for wanting too much. You started telling yourself the story that maybe, just maybe, that version of you was naive, was unrealistic, was foolish. Open your eyes. Because I'm here today to tell you something that might be the most important thing anyone has ever said to you in your entire life. That old version of you, the one who gave up, the one who settled, the one who got comfortable being uncomfortable in the worst possible way, the one who learned to smile on the outside while quietly dying on the inside, it's time to delete them, not forget them, not forget them, not run from them, delete them, consciously, deliberately, with love and with courage. Because you cannot become who you are meant to be while you are still holding on to who you used to be. And that's what today is about. That's what this moment, right here, right now, is about. This is not a speech about motivation. Motivation fades. This is not a speech about positivity. Positivity without truth is just noise. This is a speech about transformation, about the deep, terrifying, beautiful, necessary work of becoming someone new, about looking at the person you've been, with all their fears, all their habits, all their excuses, all their comfortable little lies, and saying clearly, loudly, without apology, I am done being you. Let me tell you about a man named James. James grew up in a small town in Ohio. His father worked at a factory for 31 years. His mother cleaned houses on weekends. They were good, hardworking, loving people. And when James was about 8 years old, he told his father he wanted to be an astronaut. You know what his father said? His father looked at him, not with cruelty, not with malice, but with the quiet sadness of a man who had already given up on his own dreams, and said, Son, people like us don't do things like that. People like us don't do things like that. James was 8 years old, and in that moment, without even knowing it, he swallowed those words. He took them inside himself like a seed, and over the years that seed grew. It grew into a belief, a core, fundamental, unquestioned belief that there were limits to what he was allowed to want. Limits to what he was allowed to become. Limits that were set not by God, not by the universe, not by talent or effort, or destiny, but by a tired man in a small town who had forgotten how to dream. And so James grew up. He got a job that was okay. He married someone who was okay. He lived in a house that was okay. And every single morning he woke up and felt this low hum of something wrong. Like a radio that's almost on the right station, but not quite. Like a life that was almost his, but not quite. And one day James was 43 years old, sitting in his car in the parking lot of a job he hated, and he started crying. Not sobbing, just quiet tears running down his face. And he didn't even know why. He couldn't explain it. He just felt lost, profoundly, completely lost. And in that parking lot, something broke open inside of him. And he asked himself a question he had never dared to ask before. Whose life am I living? Whose life am I? Living, but because it wasn't his. He could feel that it wasn't his. It was the life that fear had built for him. It was the life that other people's limitations had constructed around him like a cage. It was the life of a man who had never once, not once, dared to delete the old programming and write something new. That story is not just James's story. That story is the story of millions of people walking around on this planet right now. Going through motions, following scripts they didn't write. Living lives they didn't choose. Wearing masks so long they've forgotten what their real face looks like. Maybe it's your story. And if it is, I don't want you to feel shame about that. I want you to feel something much more powerful than shame. I want you to feel awake. Because the fact that you're here, the fact that something in you said yes to this moment, yes to these words, yes to the possibility that something could be different, that means the real you is still in there, still alive, still fighting, still waiting. And it's time to let them out. Now I need to talk to you about something that nobody talks about honestly enough when it comes to personal transformation. Everybody wants to talk about the victory. Everybody wants to talk about the comeback. Everybody wants to show you the highlight reel of their transformation, the before and after, the rags to riches, the breakdown to breakthrough. But nobody talks about the actual moment of deletion. The moment when you have to sit down with your old self, with everything you've believed about yourself, everything you've used to define yourself, all your old excuses, your old identity, your old story, and you have to look at it clearly and say, this is no longer true. This is no longer me. This is no longer who I choose to be. That moment is not glamorous. That moment is terrifying, because here's what nobody tells you about your old self. Your old self is comfortable. Your old self is familiar. Your old self might be hurting you, might be limiting you, might be slowly killing your potential, but it's yours. It's known. And the human brain, above almost everything else, craves what is known over what is possible. We would rather stay in a painful familiar than step into an uncertain beautiful. That again slowly in your mind. We would rather stay in a painful familiar than step into an uncertain beautiful. And this is why most people never change. Not because they can't, not because they don't want to, but because the moment they get close to real change, the moment real transformation starts knocking on the door, the old self panics. The old self says, wait. This is dangerous. This is unknown. This is scary. Let's go back. Let's stay safe. Let's stay small. And most people listen. Most people turn around and go back to the familiar pain because it at least has a name. It at least has a shape. It at least feels like home. But I need you to understand something. And I need you to really hear this deep in your bones. Zipti is not the same as living. Comfort is not the same as happiness. Thought familiar is not the same as good. And the life waiting for you on the other side of your fear, on the other side of your old self, is so much bigger, so much richer, so much more alive than anything you can currently imagine from inside the cage you've built around yourself. But you have to be willing to delete first. Let me tell you about deletion or what a forest fire does. It's terrifying. It's destructive. It consumes everything in its path. Trees that have stood for 100 years, gone in minutes. Animals scatter. The landscape becomes ash and ruin. And if you see it from a distance, it looks like pure devastation. But here's what the scientists know, that the casual observer doesn't. Some forests need to burn to survive. There are trees, the giant sequoias, the lodgepole pines, that have pine cones which literally cannot open without the heat of a fire. The seeds are locked inside, sealed shut, waiting, and they can wait for decades. Patient, persistent, full of potential that has no outlet until the fire comes. And the fire comes and it burns everything. Everything old, everything dead. Everything that was taking up space and blocking the light, gone. And then in the ash, in the aftermath of what looks like total destruction, new life. Seeds that were locked for 50 years suddenly burst open. Saplings push through the blackened ground. Within months, the forest floor is covered in green. The fire wasn't the end of the forest. The fire was the beginning of the next forest. You need a fire. You need to burn down the old version of yourself, not the essence of who you are, not your soul, not your love, not your capacity for joy, but all the dead wood, all the beliefs that are taking up space but producing nothing, all the habits that are sealing your potential shut. All the stories you've been telling yourself that are blocking the light. You need to burn it all down. And yes, it will look like destruction from the outside. People will look at you and not understand what you're doing. People will say you've changed, and they won't mean it as a compliment. People will be confused, even threatened by your transformation. Because when you change, it holds up a mirror to people who aren't willing to change. And some people would rather break your mirror than look at their own reflection. Let them look away. You keep. Now I want to talk about identity. Because this is where the real work lives. This is the deep, underground work that nobody sees but that determines everything about the life you build. Identity is not what you do. Identity is who you believe yourself to be at the most fundamental level. And most of us are walking around with an identity that was handed to us. By our parents, by our culture, by our early experiences, by the things people said to us when we were too young to know. We didn't have to believe them. You're not smart enough. You're too sensitive. You're not the creative one in the family. You're not good with money. You're not leadership material. You're too much. you're not enough. These words land on a child like wet concrete, and the concrete hardens. And you build your whole life on top of it without ever questioning whether the foundation is true. I grew up being told I was too emotional, too intense, too much in my head. And for years, I apologized for that. I tried to be quieter, calmer. I tried to sand down the parts of myself that felt too big for the spaces I was allowed to occupy. And you know what happened? I got smaller and smaller and smaller until one day I was so small I could barely feel myself anymore. And I remember the exact moment something shifted. I was sitting with a journal, just me and a blank page, and I wrote this question at the top. If I had never been told who I was, who would I be? If I had never been told who I was, who would I be? And I sat with that question for a long time. A really long time, because it's a dangerous question. It's the kind of question that once you ask it honestly, you can never fully unsee the answer. And the answer, when it came, was so clear it made me catch my breath. I would be exactly who I was already trying to be. The intensity, the emotion, the depth, those weren't flaws to be corrected. Those were features. Those were the thing. Those were the specific, unique, irreplaceable thing that only I could bring into the world. I had spent years trying to delete the best parts of myself because someone told me they were the worst parts. How many of you have done the same thing? How many of you are currently, right now, suppressing something beautiful in yourself because someone, somewhere, once told you it was ugly because I need you to hear this. The things that make you different are not your weaknesses. The things that make you different are your weapons. The things that make you different are your gift to the world. And the world desperately, urgently, hungrily needs exactly what only you can give it. But it will never receive that gift if you keep it locked inside a version of yourself that was built by fear. This is what I mean by deleting your old self. You are not deleting your soul. You are deleting the false identity that was built over your soul like a cage. You are not destroying who you are. You are destroying who you were told you had to be. And what's left, what remains after you burn all that down, is something so pure, so powerful, so unmistakably and irreducibly you that the world will not be able to look away. Let me tell you about a woman named Maria came to one of my workshops about 3 years ago. She sat in the back. Quiet, arms crossed, the kind of body language that says, I'm here but I don't believe this is going to work. And I recognized that body language immediately because I had worn it myself for years. After the event, she came up to me and she said, almost in a whisper, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know who I am anymore. And I asked her, who were you before the world told you who the world told you who to be? And she looked at me like I had asked the question in a foreign language. Like it didn't even compute. Like the idea of a self that existed before other people's definitions had simply never occurred to her. And then slowly, she started to talk to her. She had wanted to be a painter since she was 5 years old. Loved it with everything in her. Spent hours and hours creating, lost in color and form and expression. And when she was 16, she showed her father a painting she had made. Hours of work, her heart on the canvas, and he looked at it and said, oh, that's nice. But what are you going to do for money? That's nice. But what are you going to do for money? She was 16 years old. And she looked at her father, the person whose approval she needed more than oxygen, and she made a decision. Not consciously, not deliberately, but she made it. She decided that wanting to be a painter was selfish, was naive, was irresponsible. She put away the brushes. She got a business degree. She got a good job. She got married. She had 2 kids. And for 23 years, she lived a life that looked from the outside perfectly fine, and not dramatically miserable. Not dramatically miserable. Not crisis miserable. Just quietly, persistently, bone deep miserable in the way that only comes from living a life that doesn't fit your soul. And when I asked her when she had last painted, expecting her to say months, she looked down at her hands and said, 23 years. 23 years. 23 years. Can you imagine? Can you imagine taking the thing that lights you up most in the entire world and locking it in a box for 23 years? Because someone said it wasn't practical? We do this. We do this to ourselves every single day. We lock away our dreams and call it maturity. We bury our passions and call it responsibility. We abandon ourselves and call it being realistic. And then we wonder why we feel empty. Did Maria cried that night? And then she went home and she bought a set of oil paints and a canvas and she painted until 4 in the morning. She told me later that it was the first time in 23 years that she had felt completely, fully, entirely herself, the old self, the responsible one, the practical one, the one who had traded her soul for approval. She had to be deleted, not punished, not hated. She had survived, and survival has its own kind of dignity. But she had to be let go, consciously, deliberately, with gratitude for what she'd survived, and with clarity about what was no longer needed. And in her place, Maria painted. She started selling her work online. She started teaching workshops. She started smiling in a way her children had never seen before. And her children noticed. Her youngest daughter, she was 9, came to her one evening and said, "Mama, you seem different." And Maria said, "Different how?" And her daughter said, "Happier. Like you. Like you. Like you. Like you." As in, for the first time in this child's living memory, her mother seemed fully like herself, fully present, fully real. To think about what it means to the people around you when you finally show up as yourself. Think about the permission your authenticity gives others to be authentic. Think about the model you become when you are brave enough to live your real life. Your transformation is not just about you. Your transformation is a gift to everyone who is watching. Now I want to talk about fear. Because we can't have this conversation without talking about fear. Fear is the main reason people don't delete their old selves. Fear is the guard at the gate. Fear is the voice that sounds so reasonable, so logical, so calm, and is actively working against your life at every single moment. Fear says, "What if you fail?" Fear says, "What if people laugh at you?" Fear says, "Who do you think you are?" Fear says, "Stay here, stay small, stay safe." And I want to tell you something about fear that changed everything for me. For me, fear is not your enemy. Fear is not evil. Fear is not the villain in your story. Fear is a child. Fear is the child inside you who got hurt once, maybe many times, and decided that the safest strategy was to never risk being hurt again. Fear is the part of you that learned from very real and very painful experience that wanting things leads to disappointment, that being vulnerable leads to being wounded, that standing out leads to being knocked down. Fear is not trying to destroy you. Fear is trying to protect you. The problem is that fear is using a strategy that was relevant when you were 7 years old and completely irrelevant now that you are an adult with resources, resilience, and the capacity to survive and even grow from failure. So when fear shows up, and it will show up every single time you try to grow, fear will be there. I don't want you to fight it. I don't want you to suppress it. I don't want you to tell yourself that brave people don't feel fear, because that is a lie and it will make you feel worse. I want you to talk to it. I want you to say, "I hear you. I know you're scared. I know you've been hurt before. I know you're trying to keep me safe. And I love you for that. And I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to do it anyway." That is the whole secret. That is the whole formula. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the decision that something else is more important than the fear. Your dream is more important than your fear. Potential is more important than your fear. Your life, your one singular, irreplaceable, finite, precious life, is more important than your fear. Do it anyway. Let me talk about habits. Because identity is everything, but without habits, identity is just a nice idea. The new self you're building needs to be expressed daily, in small, consistent, often boring, deeply powerful actions. People want transformation to be dramatic. They want the lightning bolt moment. They want the single decision that changes everything overnight. And sometimes those moments exist. Sometimes there is a moment of clarity so sharp and so undeniable that it genuinely does shift everything. But mostly, transformation is Tuesday. Transformation is waking up on a Tuesday morning when you don't feel like it, when nobody's watching, when there's no applause and no audience and no one to pat you on the back, and doing the thing anyway, writing the page anyway, making the call anyway, going to the gym anyway, choosing the better thought anyway, being the person you are becoming even when it feels awkward and uncomfortable and fake. Because right now it is a little bit fake. Not dishonestly fake, but new habit fake. Like how everything feels strange before it feels natural. The new self is not going to feel like you immediately. This is the part nobody talks about. When you start deleting your old self and building a new one, there is going to be a period. It could be weeks, it could be months, where you feel like an imposter. where the new behaviors feel borrowed and artificial, where your old patterns keep pulling you back like gravity, where you take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, sometimes 2 steps back, sometimes you fall flat on your face. The old self will be right there, waiting. The old self will say, see, I told you this wouldn't work. I told you this isn't who you are. Come back. It's safer here. It's easier here. And this is the critical moment. This is the crossroads that determines everything. Because if you go back, the old self gets stronger. Every time you retreat, the old patterns deep. Every time you choose comfort over growth, the cage gets more familiar and more permanent. But if you stay, if you feel the discomfort and stay anyway, something extraordinary happens. The new self starts to solidify. Neuroscience tells us that every time you perform a new behavior, literally, physically building new neural pathways in your brain. The first time, it's a faint trail through the forest. But every time you walk that trail again, it gets wider, clearer, more different, until eventually it becomes a road, and then a highway. And the old trail, the old pathway, the old pattern starts to overgrow from disuse. You are not just changing your behavior. You are physically rewiring your brain. You are literally building a new self, neuron by neuron, choice by choice, day by ordinary Tuesday day. This is not poetry. This is biology. It means that change is not only possible, change is inevitable. If you keep showing up, the only way the new self fails to emerge is if you quit. So don't quit. Let me talk about the people around you. Because this is one of the most painful parts of transformation that is almost never discussed honestly. And I think it needs to be said clearly. When you change, not everyone will be happy about it. In fact, some of the people who love you most, and I mean genuinely, deeply love you, will resist your transformation with everything they have. Why? Because relationships are built on patterns, and when you change your patterns, it disrupts the whole system. The dynamic shifts, the balance changes. And people who are comfortable with the old you, who knew how to relate to the old you, who benefited in some way from the old you, who defined themselves in relationship to the old you, those people can feel threatened by the new you. Ambition makes their comfort feel like failure. Your courage makes their fear feel like weakness. Your growth holds up a mirror and asks a question they're not ready to answer. And so they push back. They say you've changed. Which, yes, that is exactly the point. They say you're getting too big for your boots. They say you're not the same person anymore. They say you've forgotten where you came from. And this will hurt. Especially when it comes from people you love. Especially when it comes from family. But here's what I need you to understand. Loving someone does not obligate you to stay small for them. Read that again. You loving someone does not obligate you to stay small for them. Genuine love, the real grown-up healthy kind, does not require you to shrink yourself to make another person comfortable. Genuine love celebrates your growth, even when it's disruptive. Genuine love says, I might not understand what you're doing, but I trust you, and I'm with you. And if there are people in your life who cannot offer you that, I say this with compassion, not with judgment. You may need to love them from a distance while you do the work of becoming. Because you cannot afford to let other people's unexplored fears become the ceiling of your life. You cannot afford it. Your life is too important. Your potential is too rare. Your time is too precious. Now let me tell you about reinvention is not betrayal. I need to say that again because it is so important and so misunderstood. Reinvention is not betrayal. It is not a betrayal of where you came from. It is not a betrayal of the people who raised you or loved you in earlier chapters of your life. It is not a betrayal of your past self, who did the best they could with what they had. Reinvention is the highest form of respect you can pay to your own life. It says, I take this life seriously. I believe it matters. I believe I can do more with it. I believe the best of what I have to offer is still ahead of me, not behind me. Some of the greatest human beings who have ever lived have reinvented themselves multiple times. Abraham Lincoln failed in business, failed in his first political races, suffered profound depression, lost a child, and became one of the most important leaders in human history. He was not the same person at 55 that he was at 30. He deleted old versions of himself many times over. And Oprah Winfrey was fired from her first television job and told she was unfit for TV. She was told she was too emotional, too empathetic, too much of herself to be a professional broadcaster. And rather than sanding herself down to fit the mold, she built a new mold. She became not despite her emotional depth, but because of it. One of the most powerful communicators in the history of media, J.K. Rowling wrote Harry Potter as a single mother on welfare in cafes on napkins while battling clinical depression. She submitted her manuscript to 12 different publishers. 12. Every single one rejected it. And the old self, the one shaped by 12 consecutive rejections, would have stopped. The old self would have said, "This is the universe telling me no." But Rowling deleted that interpretation. She chose a different one. She kept going, and the world received magic. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. 27 years. And when he walked out of that prison, he could have come out as a man consumed by bitterness and vengeance. Most of us, with a fraction of his suffering, would have come out broken. But Mandela had used those 27 years on an island in a cell, breaking rocks, to build a self so rooted, so deep, so clear in its values that nothing could touch the core of who he chose to be. He came out not as a victim, but as a visionary, not as a bitter man, but as a free one. He deleted the version of himself that might have been consumed by hatred. He kept the version that could change a country. This is what deletion looks like at its highest expression. It is not destructive. It is not self-abandonment. It is the surgical, conscious, courageous act of choosing which parts of yourself to carry forward and which parts to release, which parts are serving your highest purpose. Keep those. Which parts are old fear in disguise. Delete those. Which parts are genuine values, authentic loves, core commitments that are yours and no one else's. Keep those. Which parts are inherited limitations, other people's definitions, old wounds running on autopilot. Delete those. This is the work. This is the life's work, and it never fully ends. You don't delete your old self once and then you're done. This is not a one-time spring cleaning. This is an ongoing practice. The self that serves you at 25 may not serve you at 40. The self that got you through a period of survival may not be the self that's built for thriving. The self that protected you when you were vulnerable may need to step aside when you are strong. We are not finished products. We are works in progress, every single one of us, until the day we take our last breath. And the question isn't whether you will change. The question is whether you will change consciously, deliberately, in the direction of your highest self, or whether you will change by default, shaped by external forces, by other people's expectations, by the path of least resistance. You can be the author of your own transformation. Or you can let life write the story for you. One of those options ends with a life you recognize. The other ends with you sitting in a parking lot at 43, crying without knowing why, wondering whose life you've been living. Choose to be the author. I want to talk about failure. Because failure is the tuition of transformation, and you need to make peace with it before you can make progress with it. Everyone talks about failure. Fail forward, fail fast, fail better, and there's truth in all of that. But I don't think we talk honestly enough about how much failure actually hurts. Failure is not a concept. Failure is an experience. Failure is the phone call that doesn't come, the door that doesn't open, the pitch that gets rejected, the relationship that ends, the business that closes, the dream that dies in your hands before it ever had a chance to live. Failure is lying awake at 3 in the morning, wondering if you made a terrible mistake. Failure is looking in the mirror and not being sure you recognize the person looking back. Failure is the quiet, private, invisible devastation that social media will never show you, but that every person who has ever tried anything significant knows intimately. And I'm not going to tell you to be grateful for failure, because in the moment you don't feel grateful. You feel devastated, dear. But I'm going to tell you what failure is. Failure is proof that you are in the arena. There's a quote often attributed to Theodore Roosevelt that I think about more than almost anything else. He talks about the man in the arena, the one whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error. And he contrasts that person with the critics in the cheap seats who have never once entered the arena themselves, but who are always ready to offer their opinions on your performance. The critics are not your concern. The arena is your concern. And here's what I know about people who have been in the arena and lost. They are more alive, more real, more fully human than anyone who never dared to try. They carry something in their eyes, a depth, a knowing, a combination of humility and resilience that you simply cannot get any other way. You earn that depth in the arena, trying and failing and trying and failing and trying again. And every failure, every genuine soul-shaking, humbling failure, if you are willing to sit with it honestly, to ask what it's teaching you rather than letting it define you, is the exact data you need to become the person who will eventually succeed. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. Cut. Not recruited. Cut, or and he went home and he went to his room and he cried. And then he went back to the gym. He used the failure as fuel. He used the rejection as information. He used the pain to build something in him that no amount of easy success could have built. And he became, arguably, the greatest basketball player who ever lived. Not in spite of being cut, but in some deep, real way because of it. Because it gave him something to prove. It gave him a hunger that was personal and specific and white-hot thought. Your failures are not evidence that you're not meant for something great. Your failures might be the very thing that is preparing you for it, but only if you don't let them become your identity. This is the critical distinction. Failing is something you do. But failure is not something you are. The moment you start to say, I am a failure, instead of I failed at this thing, the moment failure shifts from an event to an identity, that's when it becomes dangerous. That's when the old self, the defeated self, the self built on the rubble of broken dreams, starts to solidify. Don't let it solidify. Don't process the pain. Grieve what needs to be grieved. Give yourself the time and space to feel what you feel. But then, with intention, with determination, with the full force of your will, decide what story you are going to tell about it. Because you are always the author of the story you tell about your own life. And the story you tell becomes the life you live. Now I want to talk about now. I want to talk about now. Not yesterday, not tomorrow. Now, because here is one of the cruelest tricks the mind plays on us. We spend incredible energy either in the past, replaying old wounds, replaying old failures, replaying old embarrassments, re-experiencing old pain as if it is happening right now or in the future. Catastrophizing, worry, building elaborate mental structures of anxiety around things that haven't happened yet and may never happen. And in doing both of these things simultaneously, we miss the only moment in which life actually exists. This one. This moment. Right here, right now. This moment is not the past. You are not the person you were in your worst moment. You are not the person who failed, who was rejected, who was hurt, who gave up. That was then. This is now. And now is a new country with new possibilities. This moment is also not the future. The catastrophes your mind invents are not real. They are projections. They are fear wearing a Halloween mask labeled the future. They are not prophecy. They are not destiny. They are not inevitable. They are stories, and you can write different stories. And you can